Billionaire CEO divorces his wife unaware she's pregnant. Months later he begged to save her and their twins. Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. The pen scratched against paper. That was the only sound in the room. Just that. The scratch of ink on divorce documents and the shallow breathing of two people who used to share everything. I hope you find what you're looking for. Her voice was quiet. Not angry. Not broken. Just tired. So tired it hurt to listen. Damien Cross didn't look up. He couldn't. If he looked at her face, at the woman sitting across from him in that cold lawyer's office, he might see what he was really doing. He might stop. He might realize he was making the biggest mistake of his life. But he didn't stop. He signed his name. Damien Cross. Theo. Visionary. Soon-to-be ex-husband. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and regret. Iris Calloway sat with her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap, watching the man across the mahogany table. The man who used to kiss her awake on Sunday mornings. The man who once told her she was the only thing that made sense in his chaotic world. That man was gone now. Replaced by someone she barely recognized. Someone who looked at her like she was an obligation he'd finally worked up the courage to abandon. The pen felt heavy in her hand. Heavier than it should have been. Heavier than the wedding ring she'd already removed that morning and left on the bathroom counter of the penthouse she'd never see again. She signed. One fluid motion. Muscle memory from years of architectural drawings. From blueprints for buildings that would outlast marriages. For structures more permanent than love. The pen scraped against paper. Final. Absolute. The sound seemed louder than it should have been. Louder than the clock on the wall. Louder than the muted conversations happening in the waiting room outside. Louder than her own heartbeat, which had slowed to something numb and distant. Damien reached for the document before the ink could dry. Before she could change her mind. Before anything in him could crack open and admit this was wrong. "Thank you for making this easy," he said. His voice was professional. Detached. Like this was a business transaction. Like the 3 years they'd spent building a life together could be filed away in some cabinet and forgotten by next quarter. Iris stood. The chair scraped against polished wood. She grabbed her purse. The one he'd bought her in Paris, back when he still believed she was worth the trip. Back when he still looked at her like she was the destination, not the detour. She walked to the door. Her heels clicked against marble. Each step taking her farther from the man who decided she wasn't enough. Her hand touched the door handle. Cold metal. Real. Grounding. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said again. Quieter this time. Not to him. To herself. To the version of herself who'd believed love could survive ambition. She didn't wait for a response. Didn't turn around to see if there was any regret in his eyes. She just opened the door and walked out. Her footsteps fading down the hallway until there was nothing left but silence. Damien sat alone at that table, staring at the empty doorway. The door swung slowly closed with a soft hiss. Final. Absolute. The lawyer. A thin man named Patterson with wire-rimmed glasses and a face that had seen too many endings. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Cross, the paperwork will be finalized within a few weeks. You'll receive copies for your records. If there are any assets that need further division, we can schedule another meeting." "I know," Damien said, cutting him off. He didn't want to hear the details. Didn't want to think about what came next. He just gathered the papers, stood, and walked out into the hallway. The courthouse was full of people. Lawyers in expensive suits. Families waiting for their turn. Children running between benches while exhausted parents scrolled through phones. But Damien felt completely disconnected from all of it. Like he was moving through water. Like sound was coming from very far away. He took the stairs. Needed to move. Needed the physical act of going down to match the way he felt inside. Outside, rain had started to fall. Just a steady drizzle that made everything look gray and washed out. The kind of rain that didn't announce itself. That just settled over the city like a blanket of indifference. Damien walked to his car and sat behind the wheel, holding the signed papers in his lap, staring at them like they were evidence of a crime he'd just committed. He'd done it. He was free. So why did he feel like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life? His phone buzzed. Victor Kane. His mentor. His business partner. The man who'd convinced him that marriage was a distraction from greatness. "It's done," Damien said when he answered. "Good." Victor's voice was crisp, eager. "That's good, Damien. Now you can finally focus on what matters. On building the empire we've been planning. No more compromises. No more splitting your attention." Damien looked at the divorce papers. At his signature. At the proof that he'd given up on the only person who'd ever really known him. "Yeah," he said. "No more compromises. Listen, we're celebrating tonight. The penthouse. Bring that focus with you. Leave the past where it belongs. It's time to move forward." Victor hung up. Damien sat there holding the phone, staring at the rain sliding down the windshield. The right choice. He'd told himself that for months. That he couldn't build the future he wanted while tied to a marriage that wasn't working. That love wasn't enough when everything else was falling apart. That walking away was the mature thing to do. But as he sat in his car, watching people rush through the rain with umbrellas and briefcases, he couldn't shake the image of her trembling hand as she signed the papers. The way she'd tried so hard to hold herself together. The way she'd wished him well, even though he was the one leaving. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. He didn't know where he was going. Just away. Away from the courthouse and the papers and the choice he couldn't take back. The city stretched out before him, gray and endless. And somewhere in it, his wife. His ex-wife. She was starting a life without him. Because he'd told her to. Because he'd decided she was holding him back. Because he'd been so sure he knew what he wanted. The rain kept falling. And Damien kept driving, leaving everything behind but carrying the weight of it with him. The apartment was smaller than she'd expected. Iris stood in the doorway of what would now be called home, looking at the studio that barely qualified as living space. One room with a kitchenette tucked into the corner and a bathroom that smelled faintly of mold and broken promises. She set down the last box and looked around at her new life. It didn't look like much. The walls were bare except for a water stain in the corner that looked like a map of somewhere she'd never been and would never visit. The carpet was worn thin in places, exposing the concrete underneath. The previous tenant had left a dying plant on the windowsill. Some spindly thing with brown leaves that she didn't have the heart to throw away. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and listened to the couple next door. They were laughing about something. She could hear them through the thin walls. Their voices bright and easy. The way hers used to be. The way hers and Damien's used to be. Before he decided she wasn't enough. Before he sat her down in their kitchen 3 weeks ago and told her he needed to focus on himself. On his future. On building something that mattered. He hadn't said she was holding him back. He didn't have to. She reached for the remote and turned on the television. A cooking show. Someone was making pasta from scratch, talking about the importance of good olive oil and fresh ingredients and taking your time with things that mattered. She turned up the volume until it drowned out the laughter next door. The days blurred together after that. She unpacked slowly, reluctantly, as if putting her things on shelves might make this place permanent. As if it might mean she was really alone now. She hung 2 dresses in the closet, put her books on the windowsill next to the dying plant, stacked her plates in the cabinet above the sink. Everything fit. That was the worst part. Her entire life fit in this tiny room because Damien had taken everything else. The apartment they'd shared. The furniture. The life they'd built. He'd left her with the scraps. At night, she lay in the second-hand bed she'd bought off an app and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building. Footsteps above her. Pipes groaning in the walls. A dog barking somewhere down the hall. She'd turn on the television again, letting strangers' voices fill the silence until she finally fell asleep. But sleep didn't bring peace. She'd wake in the middle of the night, disoriented, reaching for someone who wasn't there. Someone who'd made it clear he didn't want to be there. Weeks passed. Her body began to betray her in small ways. She'd wake up nauseous, her stomach churning for no reason. Food tasted different. Coffee made her gag. She was tired all the time. A bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. She told herself it was stress. That her body was processing the divorce the way bodies do. That heartbreak had a physical weight. The nausea came in waves. She'd be fine one moment, then the next she'd be rushing to the bathroom, her stomach heaving even when there was nothing left to bring up. She started keeping crackers by the bed. Started avoiding certain smells. Started moving more carefully, as if sudden movements might trigger another episode. Her breasts ached constantly. A tenderness that made wearing a bra uncomfortable. She bought softer ones. Looser shirts. Blamed it on her cycle being irregular from stress. One morning, she stood in the shower until the water ran cold. Her hands pressed against the tile. Her head down. Water streaming over her shoulders. She stayed there shivering until her skin turned pink and her fingers pruned. When she finally turned off the water, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her face looked thinner. Her eyes looked tired. And there was something else. A softness in her body that hadn't been there before. A tenderness. A subtle fullness she couldn't quite name. She pressed her hand to her chest and winced. Then lower. To her stomach. Nothing. Just skin and muscle and the hollow feeling of being empty. But the feeling persisted. A wrongness. An awareness of her body that felt foreign. She got dressed and went to work. She'd found a job answering phones at a law office. It was temporary. Easy. The kind of work that didn't require her to think or feel or be anything other than a voice on the line. The office was small and cramped. Filled with filing cabinets and the smell of burnt coffee. Her desk faced a wall. She liked it that way. Good morning, Harmon and Associates. How may I direct your call? The words became a mantra. A script she could hide behind. She'd say them over and over. Transferring calls. Taking messages. Existing in the spaces between other people's problems. The office was quiet most days. Just her and two lawyers who spent most of their time behind closed doors. She'd sit at her desk answering the phone when it rang. Staring at the wall when it didn't. The wall was beige. Unremarkable. Sometimes she'd catch herself touching her stomach without realizing it. A hand resting there. Protective. Aware. She'd pull her hand away quickly, as if caught doing something wrong. During her lunch break, she'd walk to the park and sit on a bench. She'd bring a sandwich she wouldn't eat. She'd just sit there, watching people move through their lives. Joggers with earbuds. Mothers with strollers. Couples holding hands. Everyone looked like they knew where they were going. She'd watch the mothers especially. The way they pushed strollers with practiced ease. The way they wiped noses and adjusted blankets and moved through the world with a purpose she couldn't comprehend. She'd watch and feel something twist inside her chest. Longing. Loss. Something she couldn't name. One afternoon in early autumn, when the leaves were just beginning to turn, she walked into a pharmacy 3 neighborhoods away from her apartment. A place where no one would recognize her. Where she could be anonymous in her fear. She walked down the aisle slowly. Past pain relievers and cold medicine and vitamins. To the back corner where pregnancy tests sat in neat rows behind plastic security cases. She stared at them for a long time. Her hand reached out. Pulled back. Reached out again. A store employee appeared beside her. A young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said Jessica. Do you need help with anything? Iris shook her head. No. I'm fine. Just looking. Jessica smiled gently. The tests are all pretty much the same. Most accurate in the morning. First thing. If you need recommendations, the digital ones are easier to read. Iris nodded. Thank you. Jessica walked away. Iris stood there for another minute. Then she reached out, grabbed a box, and walked quickly to the checkout before she could change her mind. The cashier didn't make eye contact, didn't ask questions, just scanned the box, took her cash, and handed her the bag in a way that felt practiced and discreet. Iris walked home with the bag clutched in her hand, hidden in her purse like contraband, like evidence of something she wasn't ready to face. When she got back to her apartment, she put the box in the bathroom drawer, underneath tampons and cotton balls and things she wouldn't need if the test came back positive. She couldn't bring herself to open it, couldn't face the possibility that Damien had left her while she was carrying his child, that she'd signed those papers while life was growing inside her, that she was more alone than she'd ever imagined. So she ignored it, went to work answering phones at the law office, came home, ate food that tasted like nothing, watched television until she fell asleep, and pressed her hand to her stomach when no one was looking. 2 weeks passed. The nausea got worse. The exhaustion deepened. Her clothes started feeling tight in places they hadn't before. She bought bigger shirts, told herself she was stress-eating, that grief had weight, that bodies changed when hearts broke. But late at night, alone in her apartment with the television droning and the couple next door laughing about something she'd never be part of, she'd lie in bed with one hand resting on her stomach, feeling something she couldn't name. A presence. Possibility. A terror so complete it made her chest tight. What if? The thought kept her awake until dawn. What if Damien had left her while she was pregnant? What if she was carrying his child and he was out there celebrating his freedom? What if she was about to become a mother and he'd never know? What if? What if? What if? The test sat in her bathroom drawer for 3 weeks. She'd open the drawer sometimes, stare at the box, close it again. Not yet. Not ready. Not now. But her body kept changing, kept insisting, kept making itself impossible to ignore. One morning, she woke up and barely made it to the bathroom before her stomach heaved. Once, twice, 3 times, until there was nothing left but dry sobs and the cold tile against her knees. She stayed there on the floor, her forehead pressed against the porcelain, her whole body shaking. This wasn't stress. This wasn't grief. This was something else entirely. She stood slowly, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror with red-rimmed eyes and a face that looked haunted. Then she opened the drawer, pulled out the box, read the instructions with trembling hands. Most accurate in the morning. First thing. She tore open the package, followed the directions, set the test on the counter, and waited. 3 minutes. The box said 3 minutes. She counted every second, watched the test like it might disappear if she looked away, pressed her hand to her stomach and whispered to no one and nothing. Please, please, please. She didn't know what she was asking for it to be negative, for this nightmare to be stress and nothing more, for her body to just be broken from heartbreak, not growing something that would tie her to Damien forever. Or maybe she was asking for the opposite, for proof she wasn't alone, for a reason to keep going, for something that needed her when no one else did. The 3 minutes passed. She picked up the test with shaking hands. 2 lines. Clear. Unmistakable. Positive. The test slipped from her fingers, clattered against the sink. She grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from falling. Her vision blurred. Her breath came in short gasps that didn't seem to bring any oxygen. No, 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 no. But the test didn't change. The 2 lines didn't disappear. The truth didn't become less true just because she didn't want it to be. She was pregnant. Damien had left her, divorced her, told her she was holding him back, and she'd been carrying his child the entire time. She sank to the floor of her tiny bathroom and cried until there were no tears left, until her throat was raw and her chest ached and her whole body felt emptied out. When the crying finally stopped, she sat there in the silence, one hand pressed to her stomach, feeling the slight curve that she'd been ignoring for weeks, the subtle roundness that didn't match her weight loss everywhere else. How far along? She counted back in her mind. The last time she and Damien had been together. Before he'd started pulling away. Before the late nights at the office became later. Before he'd stopped looking at her like she mattered. 2 months. Maybe more. She pressed both hands to her stomach and felt something shift inside her. Not movement. Not yet. Just an awareness. A presence that hadn't been there before and now couldn't be ignored. "I don't know what to do," she whispered to the empty bathroom. To the child growing inside her that didn't know its father had already left. To herself. To the universe that seemed intent on breaking her completely. "I don't know what to do." The fluorescent light above the mirror buzzed. The couple next door laughed about something. Life went on, indifferent to private catastrophes. And Iris sat on the cold tile floor of her tiny bathroom, pregnant and alone, carrying the child of a man who decided she wasn't worth staying for. She made an appointment with a doctor the next day. The clinic was in a part of the city she'd never been to. A place where people went when they didn't have fancy insurance or connections, or anyone to hold their hand through the hard parts. She sat in the waiting room for 45 minutes. Surrounded by women in various stages of pregnancy. Some glowing with joy. Some looking as terrified as she felt. Some accompanied by partners who held their hands and whispered reassurances. Some alone. Iris was alone. When they finally called her name, she followed a nurse down a narrow hallway to an examination room that smelled like antiseptic and resignation. The nurse took her vitals. Asked questions in a gentle, practiced way. "When was your last period? Any complications? Any history we should know about? Is this your first pregnancy? Are you here with anyone today?" "No," Iris said to the last question. "I'm alone." The nurse nodded without judgment. "The doctor will be in shortly." Iris sat on the examination table in a paper gown that crinkled every time she moved. Staring at educational posters about prenatal vitamins and developmental milestones and what to expect in each trimester. A knock on the door. The doctor entered. A woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many emergencies to be surprised by anything. "Dr. Patel." She extended her hand. Iris shook it. "So," Dr. Patel said, settling onto a stool and pulling up Iris's chart on a tablet. "You're here because you think you might be pregnant. I took a test. It was positive." "Okay. And how are you feeling about that?" Iris's throat tightened. "I don't know. That's honest." Dr. Patel's voice was kind but direct. "Let's start with some basics. When was your last period?" Iris told her. Answered the questions that followed. Yes to nausea. Yes to exhaustion. Yes to tender breasts. Yes to all the symptoms she'd been ignoring for weeks. "All right," Dr. Patel said. "Let's do an ultrasound. Get a clear picture of what's happening. See how far along you are." Iris nodded. The nurse returned with an ultrasound machine. Helped Iris lie back on the examination table. Lifted her gown to expose her stomach. "This is going to be cold," the nurse warned. The gel was cold. Iris flinched. Goosebumps spread across her arms. Dr. Patel pressed the transducer to her abdomen. Moved it slowly. Watching the screen with focused attention. Iris turned her head away. She didn't want to see. Didn't want to know. If she didn't look, maybe it wouldn't be real. Maybe she could keep living in the denial that had gotten her this far. Dr. Patel's voice changed. Just slightly. Surprise. Wonder. Something that made Iris's heart stop completely. "What?" Iris whispered. "What is it?" Dr. Patel turned the monitor toward her. The screen was dark except for 2 small shapes. Pulsing in the static. 2 rhythms. 2 heartbeats. Flickering like distant stars in a black sky. "Twins," Dr. Patel said gently. "You're pregnant with twins." The world stopped spinning. Or maybe it started spinning too fast. Iris couldn't tell the difference. She stared at the screen. At the 2 tiny pulses. And something broke open inside her chest. Something that had been holding together by sheer force of will. "That's not possible," she heard herself say. It's very possible. Based on the size, I'd estimate you're about 14 weeks along. Have you had a period recently? Iris tried to think. To remember. Everything from the past few months was a blur. The divorce. The move. Damien telling her he needed to move on. The endless days of trying to hold herself together. Trying to survive. She couldn't remember. Couldn't focus on anything except those 2 heartbeats on the screen. I need you to breathe, Dr. Patel said. Her hand on Iris's shoulder. Gentle. Grounding. Deep breaths. In and out. Iris was crying. When had she started crying? Tears were streaming down her face, hot and unstoppable, and she couldn't make them stop. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Then to her stomach. Feeling the slight swell that she'd blamed on stress eating and grief and not taking care of herself. Twins, she whispered. Yes. And from what I can see, they're healthy. Strong heartbeats. Good positioning. But Iris. Dr. Patel's voice became more serious. You're dehydrated. Your iron levels are going to need monitoring. You're underweight for this stage of pregnancy. Have you been eating regularly? Iris shook her head. Do you have support? Family? Friends? The father? The father. Iris laughed. A bitter, broken sound that didn't sound like her at all. No, she said. The father doesn't know. We're divorced. He left me. Dr. Patel's expression softened with understanding. Does he know you're pregnant? No. And he's not going to. Iris. That's your choice to make. But you need to understand what's ahead of you. Twin pregnancies are high risk. You're going to need help. Medical support. Emotional support. Someone to lean on when things get hard. And they will get hard. I can do this alone, Iris said. But her voice wavered. Can you? The question hung in the air. Heavy. Accusatory. True. Iris looked back at the screen. At the 2 tiny lives that hadn't asked to be created. At the children who would come into a world where their father had walked away before knowing they existed. Can I have a minute? She whispered. Of course. Take all the time you need. Dr. Patel stood. The nurse will come back to check on you soon. They left, taking the ultrasound machine with them. But the image stayed burned into Iris's mind. 2 heartbeats. 2 tiny futures depending on her. 2 reasons why everything had just become impossibly complicated. She pressed both hands to her stomach, feeling the slight curve beneath her palms. Feeling the weight of what was growing there. Feeling the responsibility settling over her like a heavy blanket she couldn't shrug off. I'll do this alone, she whispered to them. To the babies who couldn't hear her yet. To the children who would never know their father chose to leave. To the lives she'd protect no matter what it cost her. I promise I'll keep you safe. I'll do this alone. Damien had wanted freedom. Had wanted to build his future without her. Well, he had it. And she had this. 2 lives growing inside her that he would never know about. Because he'd made his choice. And now she was making hers. Outside the examination room, the clinic continued its rhythm. Patients coming and going. Nurses calling names. The mundane machinery of healthcare grinding forward, indifferent to personal catastrophes. And inside, Iris lay on that table with her hands pressed to her stomach, making a promise she didn't know how to keep. A promise that would define everything that came after. She would survive this. She would keep them safe. Even if it meant carrying the weight of this secret until it crushed her. Even if it meant Damien would never know what he'd left behind. Even if it meant doing the hardest thing she'd ever done, completely alone. She quit her job the next day. The office manager, a woman named Patricia with reading glasses on a chain and a voice that always sounded vaguely disappointed, looked surprised when Iris came in with her resignation letter folded in her purse. Is everything all right? Patricia's concern was genuine. Iris could hear it in the way her voice softened. In the way she took off her glasses and set them down on the desk like she was preparing to really listen. Family situation, Iris said. It wasn't entirely a lie. New family situation, actually. Growing inside her with every passing moment. 2 heartbeats that had restructured her entire reality in the span of a single ultrasound. I need to focus on some personal things. Patricia didn't press. She just nodded, processed the paperwork with quiet efficiency, and wished her well. By lunchtime, Iris's desk was empty. She walked out with a box of her few belongings. A coffee mug. A sweater. A plant she'd never watered properly. And she didn't look back. She found work answering phones from home. Medical offices mostly. Routing appointments and taking messages. The pay was less, but it was flexible. She could work in her pajamas. Could take breaks when the nausea got bad. Could exist in the small safe world of her apartment without having to face the outside. But the outside world had a way of finding her anyway. She started showing sooner than she expected. The slight swell became undeniable. Impossible to hide under loose clothing. She bought maternity clothes from a thrift store 3 neighborhoods away. Soft, forgiving fabrics that stretched over her growing belly. Clothes that smelled faintly of someone else's life. Someone else's pregnancy. Someone else's joy. She moved slower. Spoke less. Learned to navigate the world as someone carrying a secret that grew heavier every day. Every morning she'd wake up and the secret would be bigger. More present. More impossible to ignore. Every sound became Damien. Every footstep in the hallway. Every voice on the street below. Every car door closing. She'd be washing dishes and hear laughter outside and her whole body would tense. Listening for a voice she'd recognize anywhere. Listening for the particular cadence of his laugh. The way he'd emphasize certain words. The sound that used to make her smile and now made her want to hide. She'd be at the grocery store, reaching for milk, and see someone in a dark coat. The kind Damien always wore. And her heart would stop until they turned and revealed a stranger's face. A face that looked nothing like his. But for one terrible moment had been him. The city was full of ghosts. Echoes of a life she'd been forced to leave behind. Every street corner held a memory. Every restaurant a ghost of a date. Every park bench a place they'd sat and talked about futures that would never come. Futures Damien had decided he didn't want with her. One afternoon in late spring, when the air was warm and the trees were blooming and everything looked deceptively hopeful, she needed fresh air. The apartment walls were closing in. The couple next door was laughing again. Always laughing. And the babies. She'd started thinking of them as the babies now. Not it or them. The babies. They were active. Moving inside her in ways that felt like small miracles and terrible burdens all at once. She walked to the park. The same park where she'd eaten lunch during her office days. The benches were full. Families everywhere. Children on swings, their laughter cutting through the air. Dogs chasing balls. Couples walking hand in hand, lost in their own worlds. She found a spot under a tree and sat down. Her hand resting on her stomach. The bark was rough against her back. The shade was cool. The world felt almost peaceful. The babies kicked. A flutter, then another. Like they were saying hello. Like they knew she needed the reminder that they were there. That they were real. That she wasn't imagining this. "You're active today," she whispered. A jogger passed. Then another. The sun was warm on her face. She closed her eyes. Letting herself pretend, just for a moment, that everything was okay. That she was just another pregnant woman enjoying a spring day. That Damien hadn't abandoned her before knowing about them. When she opened her eyes, she saw them. Across the street. Outside a cafe with outdoor seating and bright umbrellas and people who looked like they'd never known hardship. Damien and Victor Kane. They were walking side by side. Carrying grocery bags from some expensive market she could no longer afford. Laughing about something. Actually laughing. Her breath caught in her chest like a trapped bird. Damien looked good. Healthy. His hair was shorter than she remembered. He was dressed well. In clothes she didn't recognize. Moving like someone who'd found his footing again. Someone who'd shed dead weight and felt lighter for it. Someone who'd moved past her and found something better on the other side. She stood up quickly, instinctively, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. She needed to hide, needed to disappear, needed to become invisible. She moved behind a parked van, crouching down despite her belly, despite the awkwardness, despite everything. Through the van's windows, she watched them. Watched Damien say something that made Victor throw his head back in laughter. Watched him adjust the grocery bags in his arms with easy, practiced movements. Watched him move through the world like someone who'd left the past behind and didn't regret it for a second. Like someone who was free. They stopped at the crosswalk. Her heart was beating so hard she thought she might faint. If they crossed. If they came to the park. If he saw her like this. Pregnant and hiding behind a van like some desperate creature. If he saw what he'd left behind. But they turned the other way. Walked down the street. Disappeared around the corner. Taking Damien's laughter with them. She stayed behind the van for several minutes. Her hand pressed to her chest. Trying to calm down. Trying to remember how to breathe normally. The babies kicked again. Harder this time. Sensing her distress. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're okay." But they weren't okay. Nothing was okay. She'd just seen the man who'd abandoned her looking happier than he'd been in years. While she hid behind a car, carrying his children he didn't know existed. Children he'd never wanted in the first place. Children that would have been just another thing holding him back. She walked home slowly, her legs shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. She took the long way, avoiding the main streets, keeping her head down. By the time she reached her apartment, her feet were aching and her back was burning with that particular pain that came with carrying extra weight her body wasn't designed to hold. She climbed the 5 flights of stairs. The elevator had been broken for months. Nobody seemed to care enough to fix it. She locked herself inside her apartment, leaned against the door, and finally let herself cry. That night, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Her belly was undeniable now, round and firm. The babies were real, growing, taking up more space every day, making their presence known in ways that couldn't be ignored. She lifted her shirt, ran her hand over the stretched skin. She could see movement sometimes. A foot pressing against her from the inside. An elbow. Some small part of them making their presence known. Reminding her that she wasn't alone, even though she felt more alone than ever. "Your father doesn't know about you," she said to her reflection. To them. "And he's never going to. He left us. He chose to leave. And we're going to be fine without him. Just us. Just the 3 of us." Her voice cracked on the last word. The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. Because they weren't fine. Because she was terrified. Because every day she woke up wondering how she was going to do this alone. How she was going to raise 2 children without help. Without support. Without the man who should have been here but chose not to be. She lowered her shirt and turned away from the mirror. Climbed into bed. Turned on the television. A nature documentary. Something about whales and migration and the long journeys they took across oceans. She turned up the volume and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay there, one hand on her belly, feeling the babies move. Feeling the weight of everything Damien didn't know. Everything he'd walked away from before it even existed. The couple next door was laughing again. Always laughing. She wondered what it felt like to be that carefree. To live a life unburdened by secrets and regret and the knowledge that someone you loved had decided you weren't worth fighting for. The babies kicked. "I know," she whispered to them. "I know." Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars passing. People living. Sirens in the distance. The world spinning on without her. Indifferent to her struggles. And she lay there in the dark, carrying 2 futures inside her. Wondering how she was going to do this alone. wondering if Damien ever thought about her, wondering if he felt even a moment of regret. The television droned on about whale songs and deep ocean trenches. The babies settled, and she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of oceans and drowning and voices calling her name from very far away. Voices that sounded like Damien's, calling her back, telling her he'd made a mistake. But they were just dreams. And when she woke, she was still alone. The doctor's office was in a medical building that smelled like cleaning supplies and worry. Iris sat in the waiting room, filling out forms on a clipboard, checking boxes about medical history and family conditions. When it asked for the father's information, she left it blank. Dr. Patel was waiting for her in the examination room. The same kind eyes. The same direct manner that didn't waste time on pleasantries when there was work to be done. She reviewed the forms, looked at the ultrasound images from the previous visit, and frowned. "You're anemic," she said. "Severely. Your iron levels are dangerously low, and your blood pressure is concerning." "I'm taking vitamins," Iris said. "Not enough. You need iron supplements, and you need support. Someone with you. These are high-risk pregnancies. Twins, low iron, stress indicators all over your chart. Do you have family, friends? The father?" Iris flinched at the last word. "I'm fine. I can handle it." Dr. Patel set down the chart and looked at her directly. "Can you?" The question sat between them. Heavy. Undeniable. "Yes," Iris said. But her voice wavered. "I'm not trying to judge you. I'm trying to keep you and these babies alive. Right now, you're not doing that. You're barely eating. You're not sleeping. Your body is breaking down. If you don't make changes, there will be consequences." Iris nodded, took the prescriptions, promised to do better. But doing better was harder than promising. The iron supplements made her nauseous. She'd take them and spend an hour in the bathroom, retching into the toilet. Food tasted wrong. Everything smelled too strong. She lost weight instead of gaining it. She tried to follow Dr. Patel's instructions. Really tried. She bought groceries that sat untouched in her refrigerator. She set alarms to remind herself to eat. She forced down protein shakes that tasted like chalk and made her stomach rebel. Nothing stayed down. Nothing felt right. The nights became unbearable. She'd lie awake, her back aching, her legs cramping, the babies pressing on her bladder every hour. She'd get up, use the bathroom, lie back down, get up again. The cycle repeated until dawn, when exhaustion finally dragged her under. She'd fall asleep sitting up sometimes, on the couch, at her desk, in the middle of answering a phone call for work. She'd jolt awake, disoriented, her heart racing, not knowing where she was or what time it was. Her hands started shaking, small tremors that made it hard to hold a fork, hard to type, hard to do anything that required steadiness. She dropped things constantly. A glass in the kitchen that shattered on the floor. Her phone slipping from her fingers. The remote clattering off the coffee table. Each time, she'd stare at her hands like they belonged to someone else. The babies were getting bigger, more active. She could feel them all the time now, rolling, kicking, pressing against her ribs. Sometimes it hurt. Sometimes it took her breath away. She'd press her hand to the spot and whisper to them, telling them to be gentle, to give her space she didn't have to give. One evening, she was trying to tie her shoes. A simple task that had become impossibly difficult with her belly in the way. Her fingers wouldn't cooperate. They shook too much. The laces kept slipping. She tried again, and again. Her frustration building until she was crying. Sitting on the floor of her apartment, unable to tie her own shoes. "Pull yourself together," she whispered. "You have to pull yourself together." But pulling together required energy she didn't have. She wore slip-on shoes after that. Avoided anything that required fine motor skills. Simplified her life down to the bare essentials. Answer phones. Sleep when she could. Survive. The pain started one evening in late summer. 28 weeks pregnant. Too early. Much too early. It started low in her back, then wrapped around to her stomach. Tightening. Releasing. Tightening again. Braxton Hicks, she told herself. False labor. Normal. Except it wasn't normal. She'd read all the pregnancy books. She knew the difference between practice contractions and real ones. These felt real. Not yet, she whispered to her belly. It's too early. You're not ready yet. The babies didn't listen. They never listened. The pain got worse as the evening wore on. Sharper. More frequent. She tried to work. Tried to answer the phone calls coming through. But she'd have to stop mid-sentence when a contraction hit, gripping the edge of her desk until it passed. I apologize, she'd gasp into the phone. Can you hold for just a moment? The callers were patient at first, then confused, then concerned. Are you all right? One woman asked. Fine, Iris lied. Just fine. By nightfall, she couldn't stand upright. She made it to the couch, lying on her side, breathing through the pain. It came in waves now. Regular. Relentless. She counted the seconds between contractions. Tried to time them the way the book said. 5 minutes apart. Then 4. Then 3. Too fast. Everything was happening too fast. Please, she whispered. Please, not yet. She reached for her phone. It was on the coffee table, just inches away. She stretched. Her fingers brushed the edge. She tried to grab it. Another contraction hit, harder than the others. A vice tightening around her middle. She cried out, her hand pulling back instinctively. The phone skittered off the table. She heard it hit the floor. Heard it slide under the couch. No, she gasped. No, no, no. She tried to move. Tried to reach it. But the pain was too much. Her body was fighting against itself. The contractions. The weakness. The exhaustion. All combining into something she couldn't overcome. She slid off the couch onto her knees. Crawled toward the couch. Reaching underneath. Her fingers searching in the dust and darkness. The contractions were coming faster now. She could barely catch her breath between them. Her vision was blurring at the edges. She was sweating and shivering at the same time. Help, she called out. Her voice was weak, barely audible. Someone help me. But the walls were thick. The couple next door was gone. The building was quiet. Another contraction. The worst one yet. She curled into herself. Her forehead pressed to the floor. Her hands clutching her stomach. She could feel something wet between her legs. Blood or water or both. She didn't know. She tasted copper. Had bitten her tongue without realizing it. The room was spinning. The ceiling fan above her rotated slowly. Hypnotically. She watched it turn. Counted the rotations. Lost count. Started again. I'm sorry, she whispered to the babies. I'm so sorry. She thought about Damien. About how he'd left her. About how he didn't know. About how if she died here, alone on this floor, he'd never know what he'd abandoned. He'd never know he had sons. Would never know they existed. Would go on with his life thinking he'd made the right choice. The darkness at the edges of her vision was spreading. Soft. Almost welcoming. Like falling asleep. Like letting go. She heard her own voice. Small and desperate. Echoing in the empty room. Please. Not yet. Then nothing. The silence stretched. Long and complete. The only sound was the ceiling fan turning and her shallow breathing getting shallower. The neighbor's dog started barking. Loud. Persistent. It barked and barked until finally the neighbor came out to see what was wrong. Stood in the hallway. Heard something through her door. A sound. A moan. Something wrong. Hello, the neighbor called. Are you okay in there? No answer. I'm calling 911, the neighbor shouted. The ambulance siren was the first thing she registered. Far away at first. Then closer. Then deafening. Someone was shouting. Hands on her body. Lights too bright. Movement too fast. We're losing her, someone said. The voice was urgent. Professional. Scared. She tried to speak. To tell them she was still here. Still fighting. But the words wouldn't come. The siren wailed as they raced through the city. Inside the ambulance, her heartbeat flickered on a monitor. Weak. Irregular. Fading. Like a light being slowly turned off. The paramedic kept talking to her. Kept telling her to hang on. Kept saying they were almost there. But his voice was getting distant. Fading like everything else. She thought about the babies. About Reed and Roman. The names she'd chosen in the quiet moments alone. About whether they'd survive without her. About whether Damien would ever know they existed. About whether any of this mattered. The ambulance doors burst open. Bright lights. Running. Voices overlapping. She was being moved. Lifted. Rushed somewhere. Then nothing. Just the slow fade into darkness. And the last thought she had before everything went black was simple and devastating. He'll never know. Damien will never know what he left behind. The delivery room was chaos dressed as medicine. Doctors and nurses moved in synchronized urgency. Their voices clipped and efficient. Calling out numbers and medical terms that meant life or death. The air was thick with tension. With the metallic smell of blood. With the desperate energy of people fighting against time itself. Dr. Patel stood at the center of it all. Her hands steady despite everything. Delivering 2 babies who came into the world silent and blue. She'd delivered hundreds of babies in her career. Thousands maybe. But these 2 felt different. Heavier. Like the weight of their mother's solitude had transferred to them. The first twin emerged limp. No cry. No movement. No pink flush of life. A nurse swept him away to a warming table. Working on him with practiced desperation. Suction. Stimulation. Oxygen. Her hands moved quickly. Professionally. But her face showed the strain of fighting against the inevitable. Of trying to coax life into a body that hadn't decided yet whether living was worth the fight. The second followed quickly. Just as silent. Just as still. Another nurse. Another table. Another fight against death. 2 tiny bodies that should have had months more to grow. To strengthen. To prepare for the world they'd been forced into too soon. And on the delivery table, Iris was bleeding out. BP dropping, a nurse called. 80/40. Hang another unit, Dr. Patel ordered. Her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Check the blood bank. A technician. Young. Nervous. Already at the computer. His fingers flying over the keyboard. What's her type? AB negative. His fingers stopped. He frowned. Clicked. Searched. His shoulders tensed. Doctor, we have a problem. Dr. Patel didn't look up. Talk to me. There's no match. AB negative is rare. The banks are depleted. There was a major accident earlier. Multiple casualties. They cleaned us out. The monitor beeped a warning. Blood pressure dropping. 60/30. Critical. Then widen the search. Go statewide. National if you have to. That'll take time we don't have. Dr. Patel made a decision. The kind that separated good doctors from great ones. The kind that bent rules but saved lives. Check her file. Emergency contacts. Family. Anyone who might be a match. A nurse. Rodriguez. Veteran of 1,000 emergencies. Grabbed the intake file. Flipped through mostly empty pages. There's nothing here. She came in alone. All the forms are blank. Rodriguez stopped, squinted at the page, looked closer. Except what? There's an old contact from a previous visit. Must be from before. Damien Cross. Listed as husband. But there's a note here. Divorced. Dr. Patel looked at the woman on the table. At the twins fighting for life across the room. At the numbers that kept dropping like stones. Call him, she said. Call him now. But they're divorced. I don't care if he left her. I don't care if he broke her heart. I don't care if he never wants to see her again. I care about keeping this woman and these babies alive. Make the call. Rodriguez dialed with shaking fingers. Whispered a prayer under her breath. It rang, and rang, and rang. In the neonatal corner, one of the babies made a sound. A small, wet gasp. Then a cry. Weak but present. Like a kitten mewing for its mother. The nurse working on him. A woman who'd seen hundreds of premature births and knew which ones would make it and which ones wouldn't. She looked up with relief. We got one, she called. Baby A is breathing. The second baby followed moments later. Another gasp. Another cry. Both weak. Both struggling. But alive. Fighting. Proving that life wanted to continue even when the odds said it shouldn't. Dr. Patel allowed herself 1 second of relief. 1 moment to acknowledge that at least the babies had a chance. Then turned back to Iris, whose chance was slipping away with every heartbeat. Still no answer, Rodriguez said. Jaw tight. It went to voicemail. I'll try again. She dialed. Across the city, in a restaurant with low lighting and expensive wine, Damien Cross sat at a table with Victor Kane, celebrating a deal that would expand his empire into 3 new cities. His phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. He glanced at it, turned it face down. Spam probably. Or a wrong number. Nothing that couldn't wait. Everything good? Victor asked, raising his glass. Fine, Damien said. Just spam probably. The phone buzzed again. Popular tonight, Victor said with a grin. Want to get that? Damien looked at the phone. Unknown number again. But it was probably just telemarketers. Someone trying to sell him something he didn't need. No, he said. It can wait. In the delivery room, Rodriguez hung up. Dialed again. Held the phone to her ear like a prayer. Like a lifeline thrown into dark water, hoping someone would grab it. Come on, she whispered. Pick up. Please pick up. The restaurant was loud. Conversation and laughter and the clinking of glasses. The sound of people enjoying life. While somewhere across the city, someone was dying. Damien tried to focus on what Victor was saying. Something about celebrations and future plans and the world they were building. But his attention kept drifting to his phone. It buzzed a 3rd time. You should get that, Victor said. His grin fading to concern. 3 calls in a row might be important. Damien picked up the phone. Same unknown number. 3 calls in a row. That wasn't spam. That was something else. Something urgent. Something that made his stomach clench with instinctive dread. Excuse me, he said, standing. I should take this. He walked toward the restaurant entrance. Weaving between tables full of people who didn't know that across the city, 3 lives hung in the balance. He pressed the phone to his ear. Hello. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. Professional but desperate. The voice of someone who'd learned to deliver terrible news without breaking. Is this Damien Cross? Yes. Who is this? This is Rodriguez from Metro General Hospital. I'm calling about your wife. Damien stopped walking. The restaurant noise faded to background static. The world narrowed to just this voice. This moment. This impossible statement. My wife. I don't have. I divorced her. Yes, we have that noted. But your name is still listed as her emergency contact. Sir, I need you to listen very carefully. Your ex-wife is dying. Her twin sons are barely stable. She has AB negative blood. We don't have enough. We've searched everywhere. Every blood bank in the region. Every hospital. You're the only person listed in her file. Damien felt the world tilt. Wife. Ex-wife. Sons. Twins. The words didn't make sense. Didn't connect to anything real. Didn't fit into the story he'd been telling himself about moving on and starting fresh and leaving the past behind. I don't understand, he said. I need to know your blood type, Mr. Cross. Right now. AB negative, he said automatically. Same as. He stopped. Understood. The pieces clicking into place like a lock opening. Oh God. Mr. Cross. Rodriguez's voice was steady. Anchoring. The voice of someone who'd delivered this kind of news before. Who knew how to keep people from falling apart. Only your blood can save your ex-wife and twin sons. The sons you didn't know existed. The phone felt heavy in his hand. Behind him, Victor was calling his name, asking if everything was okay. In front of him, the door to the restaurant stood open. Night air rushing in, carrying rain and the smell of wet pavement. He'd left her, divorced her, told her she was holding him back. And she'd been carrying his children. I'm coming, he said. Tell me where. Have you ever made a choice you can't take back? A choice that haunts you in the quiet moments? That follows you no matter how far you run or how much success you build on top of it. If this story is pulling you in, if you feel the weight of what Damien's about to face, hit that like button. You'll want to see where this goes. Because what happens next will change everything. Damien drove like a man possessed. Ran red lights. Ignored horns. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Twins. His twins. She'd been pregnant when he left her. Pregnant when he told her she was holding him back. Pregnant when he signed those papers and walked away. And she never told him. Why didn't she tell him? The answer came. Sharp and cutting. Because you left her. Because you made it clear you didn't want her anymore. Why would she tell you anything? The hospital loomed ahead. He parked crooked. Didn't care. Ran through the rain. His shoes splashing in puddles. Inside. Straight to the desk. Damien Cross. My wife. Ex-wife. She needs blood. I'm the donor. The nurse looked up. Recognition flashing in her eyes. Follow me. Through double doors. Down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear. Into a donation room. Rodriguez met him. Exhausted but focused. Sit, she said. He sat. She found a vein. The needle pinched. This is going to take a few minutes. Damien watched his blood flow through the tube. Red and alive. A piece of him traveling toward her. Connecting them again. The babies, he said. Are they breathing? Weak, but breathing. The real concern is your ex-wife. She lost too much blood. Damien nodded, unable to speak past the guilt choking him. The machine beeped. Collection complete. Rodriguez removed the needle. Taped gauze to his arm. Can I see her? Not yet. Let us start the transfusion. And the babies? NICU. Down the hall. Rodriguez left with the blood bag. Damien sat alone. His arm burning. His world restructured into a shape he didn't recognize. A nurse appeared. The twins are this way. If you'd like to see them. Damien stood on shaking legs. Followed her down the hall. The NICU was behind glass walls. Rows of incubators. Tiny lives fighting for breath. The nurse led him to two side by side. Baby A, she said, pointing left. And baby B. Inside each incubator, impossibly small, lay a child. His children. They were tiny. Translucent skin. Tubes and wires. But perfect. Can I touch them? Through the ports. He reached through the opening. His hand looked enormous next to baby A. He touched the tiny hand with one finger. The baby's fingers uncurled, wrapped around his finger, held on with surprising strength. Damien's throat closed. Tears spilled over. "Hey," he whispered. "I'm your father. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there." He moved to baby B. The second twin grabbed his finger too. Both holding on. Both alive because of blood he'd just given. "I'm not leaving again," Damien whispered. "I promise. I'm here now." Rodriguez appeared beside him. "Your ex-wife is awake." Damien looked at his sons one more time. Then followed Rodriguez to a room where the woman he'd abandoned was fighting her way back to life. She was asleep when he entered, pale against white sheets. 4 in her arm. Monitors tracking vitals. So still. So fragile. Damien pulled a chair beside her bed. Sat down. Planned to stay only until she woke. But exhaustion hit him like a wave. His head dropped. His eyes closed. He slept. When he woke, gray light filtered through blinds. Morning. She was still asleep. Still breathing. His phone buzzed. Victor. He ignored it. A nurse came in. Surprised to see him. "You're still here?" Most ex-husbands don't stay. Damien flinched at ex-husband. She checked Iris's vitals. "She's doing much better. Should wake soon." The nurse left. Damien sat in silence, watching her breathe, trying to remember the last time he'd seen her face this peaceful. He couldn't. Hours passed. Damien didn't move. Evening came. Golden light through windows. Damien's eyelids grew heavy again. He fought it. Wanted to be awake when she woke. But sleep took him. And in the bed, Iris's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. She was coming back. Iris woke to the sound of rain on glass. Her chest burned. Her limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. She turned her head slowly, and saw him. Damien. Asleep in a chair beside her bed. Wrinkled clothes. Dark circles under his eyes. Fresh 4 marks on his arm. Her breath caught. "Damien." He stirred. Eyes opened. Confusion. Then recognition. Then something that looked like relief and guilt mixed together. "You're awake," he said. His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" He reached for water. Held the straw to her lips with shaking hands. She drank. Suspicious but too thirsty to refuse. "The hospital called me," he said. "You were still my emergency contact." Iris remembered. "The babies. Are they alive?" "Both of them. In the NICU. Small but breathing. They're fighters." She pressed her hand to her flat stomach. Grief hit her. "Can I see them?" "You need rest first." She looked at him. Really looked. At the exhaustion. At the marks on his arm. "You gave blood," she said. He nodded. "Why?" The question came out sharp. "You left me. You divorced me. Why would you come here?" Damien flinched. "Because you're the mother of my children. Because I was wrong. Because—" His voice broke. "Because I'm sorry." She stared at him. "You didn't know about them. How can you be sorry for abandoning children you didn't know existed?" "I'm not sorry for that. I mean, I am. But—" He ran his hand through his hair. "I'm sorry for leaving you. For making you feel like you weren't enough. You weren't the problem. I was." "You're sorry," she repeated. The words felt hollow. "You broke my heart. You made me feel worthless. And now you're sorry." "Yes. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know. Walking away from you was the biggest mistake of my life." Iris broke. Tears streamed down her face. Hot and angry and sad all at once. "Do you know what it was like? Finding out I was pregnant after you'd left. Seeing 2 heartbeats on that screen, knowing you'd chosen to walk away. Every appointment, every kick, every terrifying moment. I was alone. Because you decided I wasn't worth staying for. I know. I'm so sorry. Stop saying that. Her voice cracked. Sorry doesn't give me back those months. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you looked at me and decided I wasn't enough. Damien leaned forward. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. You're right. I can't change what I did. I can't take back the pain I caused. But I'm here now. And if you'll let me, if you'll give me even the smallest chance, I want to be here for you, for them. Not because I gave blood, not because I feel obligated, but because I love you. I never stopped loving you. I just convinced myself that love wasn't enough. And now I know love is the only thing that matters. Everything else, everything I thought was important means nothing without you. Silence. Iris closed her eyes, felt the tears continue. I don't know if I can trust you again. Then don't. Not yet. Just let me be here. Let me prove I've changed. Let me meet our sons and be the father I should have been from the beginning. What are their names? She asked, changing the subject. They don't have names yet. Nurses are calling them Baby A and Baby B. Reed, she said. And Roman. Damien nodded. Strong names. They had to be survivors. He reached for her hand. She almost pulled away. Almost. But she was too tired. And his hand was warm. Then he did something unexpected. He took her hand and pressed it to his chest, where his heart beat steady and strong. She felt it. The rhythm. The life. Your blood is in me, he said quietly. Mine is in you. The divorce papers said we were done. But this says we're connected in ways that go deeper than any document. Iris didn't pull away. Just rested her hand there, feeling the proof they were both still alive. Still possible. I don't forgive you, she whispered. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did. It broke something in me. I know. And I'll spend every day trying to earn your forgiveness. Even if it takes forever. Even if you never give it to me. I'm not leaving again. Outside, the rain stopped. Clouds parted. The first light of dawn broke through. Golden and new. Down the hall, Reed and Roman opened their eyes. Two tiny boys who carried the blood of a love that had refused to die. Damien looked at the woman in the bed. The mother of his children. The keeper of his heart. The person he'd almost lost forever. And she looked back with eyes that held pain and something else. Something that looked like the smallest glimmer of hope. No words. Not yet. Words would come later. Apologies. Explanations. Decisions about what came next. But right now, there was only this. Two people who'd lost everything. Finding their way back through blood and choice and the refusal to give up. Love that survived even when everything else died. Even when he'd tried to kill it himself. Some say love dies when trust is broken. But sometimes love refuses to die. Even when we try to kill it ourselves. Damien had chased success and lost everything that mattered. Iris had survived alone and discovered strength she never knew she had. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Forgiveness doesn't come overnight. Trust, once shattered, takes years to rebuild. But in that quiet hospital room, with their sons breathing down the hall and their blood flowing in each other's veins, something impossible began. Not a happy ending. Not yet. But a beginning. A chance to choose love over pride. To choose presence over ambition. To choose the people who matter most. Before it's too late. Because some mistakes can't be undone. But some can be forgiven. And some love, no matter how broken, refuses to die. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the choices you've made or the people you've left behind, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have forgiven him? Or are some betrayals too deep to heal? I want to hear your truth. Because stories like this, they're not just entertainment. They're mirrors, showing us who we are, who we could be, and who we still have time to become. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Through Iris's pain and Damien's regret and the fragile hope that love, real love, can survive anything if we're brave enough to fight for it. Until next time, choose love. Choose presence. Choose the people who matter. Before it's too late.